If that woman was mean enough to do a thing like that, she ought to have the nerve to meet her punishment. These were the words of former U.S. President Theodore Roosevelt at a criminal special pleading on account of gender. Throughout history, people have described women as the gentler sex, often believing they are incapable of hurting a fly. But in this video, we'll talk about the most shocking female executions in U.S. history, their crimes, last meals, and final words. Dora Wright, State, Oklahoma. Date of execution, July 17, 1903. On July 17, 1903, Dora Wright was hanged at McAllister, in the present-day state of Oklahoma. She beat and tortured her alleged niece, 7-year-old Annie Williams, until she died. Wright was supposed to be taking care of the little girl. However, she tormented Annie for many months until she passed away. The child had been literally cut to pieces with switches, the Capitol reported, but the demon did not stop here. There were burned marks and holes on the flesh, where a hot iron had been applied. Then the fiend used some instrument upon the child to complete the hellish crime. Wright admitted beating Annie, saying she punished her for her wrongdoings. According to the testimony presented in court, Wright pursued a course of cruelty which was fiendish and barbarous. On May 30th of the same year, the Oklahoma jury found Wright guilty of Annie's murder. She was given the death sentence. On July 17, 1903, Wright was executed by hanging. Her last words were to the jailer, "Don't make it quite tight." She said this referring to the noose around her neck. There are no records of her last meal. Lisa Montgomery, State, Indiana. Date of execution, January 13, 2021. On October 26, 2007, Montgomery was sentenced to death. She was convicted of kidnapping and killing Bobby Joe Stinnett and stealing her unborn baby. The women met through dog shows and often talked in an online rat terrier chat room called Ratter Chatter. In their emails, Montgomery used the name Darlene Fisher. She told Stinnett she was pregnant, so they started sharing emails about their pregnancies. Stinnett had puppies for sale, and Montgomery expressed interest in buying one. As a result, the women agreed to meet at Stinnett's residence. On December 16, 2004, Montgomery drove from her home in Melbourne to Skidmore. She got to Stinnett's house around 12:30 in the afternoon. She wore a jacket that helped her conceal the kitchen knife and the white cord she paired with it. In total, Montgomery spent about 4 hours with Stinnett before she attacked her. She strangled her with the white cord until she became unconscious. Then used the kitchen knife to tear Stinnett's stomach open, causing Stinnett to regain consciousness. Stinnett struggled with Montgomery and was overpowered. Montgomery strangled her a second time, eventually killing her. She took the baby and drove towards Topeka, Kansas. Stinnett's mother, Becky Harper, found her lying in a pool of blood shortly after Montgomery left. That same day, Montgomery called her husband and told him she had gone into labor during a Christmas shopping trip in Topeka. The following day, the police arrested Montgomery at her farmhouse in Kansas. During an investigation, she confessed to killing Stinnett, cutting the baby from her womb and kidnapping the baby. The baby, who had survived the attack, was safely recovered by authorities and returned to her father. Montgomery was finally sentenced to death on April 4, 2008 in the U.S. District Court. On January 13, 2021, she was executed by lethal injection at the Federal Corrections Complex in Terre Haute, Indiana. Reports indicate that when the warden asked her if she had any last words, she replied, "No." There are no records of her last meal either. Kelly Gissendanner, State, Georgia. Date of execution, September 30, 2015. Gissendanner was convicted in Georgia for plotting to murder her husband, Douglas. Her boyfriend, Gregory Bruce Owen, who was the major culprit, waited near their home that day and attacked Douglas with a knife. Owen forced him back into his car and drove to a wooded area in Gwinnett County, near Harbins Park, where he attacked Douglas, stabbing him multiple times. Gissendanner arrived at the scene shortly afterwards, helped set the car on fire and hid the dead body in the woods. In court, Owen testified against Gissendaner as part of a plea deal. He said she had approached him 3 months before the murder about a way to get rid of her husband. He said Gissendaner thought murder was the only way to get her husband out of her life. She wanted his house and a payoff from his life insurance policy. In 1998, Gissendaner was sentenced to death while Owen was given a life sentence. On September 30, 2015, Gissendaner was executed by lethal injection at the Georgia Diagnostic and Classification Prison in Jackson, Georgia. According to the Georgia Department of Corrections, Gissendaner's last meal consisted of Texas nachos with fajita meat and a diet frosted lemonade. As she gave her last words, she cried, prayed, and sang Amazing Grace. Her last words were, "And I love you, Sally. And I love you, Susan. You let my kids know I went out singing Amazing Grace. And tell the Gissendaner family I am so sorry. That amazing man lost his life because of me, and if I could take it back, if this would change it, I would have done it a long time ago. But it's not, and I just hope they can find peace, and I hope they find some happiness. God bless you." Lisa Coleman, State, Texas. Date of execution, September 17, 2014. In June 2006, Coleman was convicted and sentenced to death for capital murder. 2 years before, on July 26, Coleman's girlfriend, Marcella Williams, called the emergency operator. She reported that 9-year-old Devontae had stopped breathing at their home in Arlington, Texas. When emergency medical personnel arrived, Coleman told them that Devontae had stopped breathing some minutes earlier. However, the personnel noted rigor mortis and concluded that Devontae had been dead for several hours. Devontae weighed 8 pounds and had 250 scars on his body when he died. His wrists and legs had infected wounds from constant binding with plastic extension cords. Further reports state that there was a fresh tear in Devontae's lip and a healing tear where his ear connected to the side of his head. Blood stains were also found on a golf club in the home. It was presumed that Coleman had hit Devontae with the golf club. However, forensic reports in court indicated that the blood was from a transfer, not spatter. At first, Coleman and Marcella Williams were arrested and charged with injury to a child. However, the charges were later upgraded to capital murder. Coleman rejected a plea deal and went to trial, while Williams pled guilty to murder in exchange for a life sentence. On September 17, 2014, she was executed by lethal injection. Coleman's last words were to her family. "I just want to tell my family I love them. My son, I love him. The girls on the row, I love them and keep their heads up. Tell Darlie I love her, hand in hand. God bless y'all. I'm all right. Tell them I finished strong. I love y'all. I'm done. I love you, Richie. I love you. Thank you, Brad and John, all of y'all. God is good. I love you, Auntie. I'm done." There are no records of her last meal. Aileen Warnos. State, Florida. Date of execution, October 9, 2002. Warmos engaged in street prostitution along the highways of Florida. While doing her job, she robbed and shot dead 7 of her male clients. All 7 deaths happened between 1989 and 1990. Warmos said the men she killed had either sexually assaulted or attempted to sexually assault her. She admitted to committing the murders, but under self-defense. Warmos killed her first victim, Richard Charles Mallory, on the 30th of November, 1989. She said that Mallory drove her to an abandoned area for sexual services. But when they go there, he beat and raped her. In return, she killed him. 2 days after the murder, a Volusia County deputy sheriff found Mallory's abandoned vehicle. On December 13th of the same year, his body was found miles away in a forest. The cause of death was 2 bullets to his left lung. Warmos's second victim was David Andrew Spears. On May 19, 1990, he was declared missing. On June 1, 1990, His naked body was found along US 19 in Citrus County. He had been shot 6 times with a .22 pistol. The name of Warmos's third victim was Charles Edmund Carskadden. On June 6, 1990, his naked body was found in Pasco County. He had been shot 9 times with a .22 pistol. His body was wrapped in an electric blanket and had started to decay when they found him. Warnos was a prime suspect because witnesses said they saw her with Carskadden's vehicle. She had also pawned a gun, which allegedly belonged to the victim. Warmos's fourth victim was Peter Abraham Seams. He left Florida for Arkansas in June 1990. On July 4, 1990, his car was found in Orange Springs, Florida. Warnos and an accomplice, Tyria Moore, were seen abandoning the car. Her fingerprint was also found on the interior door handle. Unfortunately, his body was never found. Warmos's fifth victim was reported missing on July 31, 1990. His name was Troy Eugene Burris. His body was found on August 4, 1990, along State Road 19 in Marion County. Forensic reports showed that he had been shot twice. Charles Richard Humphreys was Warmos's sixth victim. His body was found on September 12, 1990, in Marion County. Unlike the others, he was fully dressed. He had also been shot 7 times in the head and torso. The police found his car in Suwannee County. Warmos's final victim was Walter Gino Antonio. His naked body was found on November 19, 1990. It was found near a remote logging road in Dixie County. He had been shot 4 times. 5 days later, the police found his car in Brevard County. On January 16, 1991, Warmos confessed to murdering her victims. On January 14, 1992, she went to trial for the murder of Richard Charles Mallory. Even though past crimes usually aren't allowed as evidence in court, Florida's Williams Rule made an exception. It allowed the prosecutors to show details of her other crimes, proving she had a pattern of breaking the law. On March 31, 1992, Warnos pleaded no contest to the murders of Charles Richard Humphreys, Troy Eugene Burris, and David Andrew Spears, saying she wanted to get right with God. On May 15, 1992, Warnos was given 3 more death sentences. In June of the same year, she pleaded guilty to the murder of Charles Edmund Carskadden. In November of the same year, she received her 5th death sentence. In February 1993, Warnos pleaded guilty to the murder of Walter Gino Antonio and was sentenced to death again. It is not stated whether Antonio was one of her male clients, but he was one of her victims. No charges were brought against her for the murder of Peter Abraham Seams, as his body was never found. So Warnos received 6 death sentences in total. She was executed by lethal injection on October 9, 2002. Her last words were, "Yes, I would just like to say I'm sailing with the Rock, and I'll be back, like Independence Day with Jesus." June 6th, like the movie. "Big mothership and all, I'll be back, I'll be back." She declined the offer to have a last meal and asked for 1 simple cup of coffee. Suzanne Basso. State, Texas. Date of execution, February 5, 2014. Basso was one of the 6 co-defendants convicted in the August 1998 torture and murder of Louis Buddy Musso. He was killed for life insurance money. Basso had wooed a mentally impaired Buddy into leaving his family and friends in New Jersey. She encouraged him to move to Texas under the guise that she would marry him. The perpetrators included Basso, her son James O'Malley, Bernice Aarons Miller, and her children, Craig and Hope Aarons, and Hope's fiancé, Terrence Singleton. According to O'Malley, Musso was killed at Miller's apartment, where he was beaten and burned with cigarettes. The group used a wire brush on him, then placed him in a bathtub filled with a mixture of kitchen cleaner and bleach. The victim was found in a ditch with injuries so horrendous that the body was unrecognizable. They put clothes on his body before abandoning him in Galena Park, Texas. Suzanne Basso was convicted and sentenced to death for killing a mentally impaired man. She was held at the Texas Department of Criminal Justice, TDCJ, in Gatesville while on death row. Basso was executed on February 5, 2014, at the Huntsville unit of the Criminal Justice Department. When asked if she had a last statement, she replied to the prison warden, "No, sir." There are no records of her last meal. Teresa Lewis, State, Virginia, date of execution: September 23, 2010. Teresa was sentenced to death for the murders of her husband and stepson in October 2002. She wanted to benefit from a $250,000 life insurance policy her stepson had as a U.S. Army reservist. On October 23, 2002, Lewis gave $1,200 to her love interests to purchase firearms and ammunition. Their names were Matthew Jesse Schallenberger and Rodney Lamont Fuller. They had planned to kill her husband, Julian Lewis, and her stepson, Charles. The group failed at their first attempt. However, they tried again a week later. On October 30th of the same year, Schallenberger and Fuller entered the Lewis's trailer through a back door that Teresa had intentionally left open. While she waited in the kitchen, Schallenberger shot the sleeping Julian several times, while Fuller shot Charles in his bedroom with a shotgun. When Fuller found out his first shots hadn't killed Charles, he shot him twice more. According to reports, Teresa waited for 45 minutes before calling the police. While waiting for them to arrive, she removed $300 from her dying husband's wallet and shared it among them. Not long after, Teresa Lewis was caught attempting to withdraw $50,000 from her dead husband's account using a fake check. Less than a week later, she admitted to the police that she had paid someone to kill him. During the investigation, prosecutors discovered that Lewis was trying to get her husband's and stepson's money and property even before they were buried. Teresa was given the death sentence, while Schallenberger and Fuller were each given life sentences in separate trials. On September 23, 2010, Lewis was executed by lethal injection at Greensville Correctional Center near Jarrett. Her last words were, "I just want Kathy to know that I love you and I'm very sorry." Teresa's last meal consisted of 2 fried chicken breasts, sweet peas with butter, a Dr. Pepper, and apple pie for dessert. Wanda Jean Allen, State, Oklahoma, date of execution, January 11, 2001. Allen was sentenced to death in 1989 for the murder of Gloria Jan Leathers. Leathers was her longtime girlfriend, and they both lived in Oklahoma City until she passed. The two had met in prison, and though they had a violent relationship, they were already living together by 1988. On December 2, 1998, Allen and Leathers were arguing in a grocery store. A city police officer took them home and stood by while Leathers packed her things. Before she left the house, Allen asked her to stay and try to fix their problems. Allen was escorting Leathers to her car when Leathers picked up a garden rake and hit Allen in the face with it. Afterward, Leathers and her mother went to the Oklahoma City Police Station to file a complaint against Allen. Allen followed them, claiming she wanted to convince Leathers not to leave her. When she got to the parking lot and saw Leathers still holding the rake, she went back to her own car and got a gun. As Leathers approached, Allen shot her. Only Leathers' mother witnessed the shooting. 2 police officers and a dispatcher inside the station heard the gunshot but did not see what happened. Later, police found a .38 caliber handgun near the women's home, which they believed was the murder weapon. Leathers died from her injuries 3 days later, on December 5, 1988. The state charged Allen with first-degree murder, and on January 11, 2001, Allen was executed by lethal injection at Oklahoma State Penitentiary in McAlester. Her last words were, "Father, forgive them. They know not what they do." That's it. Thank you. For her last meal, she only ate a bag of chips. Marilyn K. Plants, State, Oklahoma. Date of execution, May 1, 2001. Plants was executed in Oklahoma for hiring men to kill her husband. She hired her teenage boyfriend, Clifford Bryson, and his friend, William McKimble, to kill her husband for about $300,000 in life insurance. McKimble said he and Bryson beat Plantz's husband, James Plantz, with baseball bats when he came home from work. Clifford came out at him and hit him in the arm and the head. He yelled, "Marilyn!" and fell to the ground, McKimble said at a preliminary hearing. He further mentioned that they hit James more than 10 times with the bats. Marilyn Plantz had given them the bats. Marilyn was in the bedroom. She said she didn't want to see her husband when we did that to him, he said. But she did come to the front door to hand them her car keys when they put her husband, who was still moaning, into his pickup truck, McKimble testified. McKimble said they then drove James Plantz to a spot on Northeast 50 near Sooner Road. They put him in his pickup's cab and set him on fire with gasoline. He said, "As the flames began, I saw him sitting up." This means that James was still alive at the time the vehicle was doused with gasoline and set ablaze. The medical evidence showed that he had inhaled smoke into his lungs. On March 24, 1989, Marilyn Plantz was convicted of murder. She was sentenced to death 1 week later. Bryson also received a death sentence since he didn't agree to testify against his co-defendants. He was executed on June 15, 2000. Meanwhile, William agreed and was sentenced to life in prison. On May 1, 2001, Marilyn Plantz was executed by lethal injection in the Oklahoma State Penitentiary in McAlester. Her last words were, "I want to tell all of my family that I love them very much, especially Trina and Chris. What God has given me is love, and I have overcome the world, and I just want y'all to know that nothing, absolutely nothing, can separate us from the love of God. And if y'all want to see me again, you must be born again." For her last meal, she asked for chicken taco salad, a Mexican pizza, 2 soft chicken tacos, 2 cinnamon twists, a pecan pie, and 2 cans of Coke. Lois Nadine Smith. State, Oklahoma. Date of execution, December 4, 2001. Smith was executed by the state of Oklahoma for choking her son's ex-girlfriend, stabbing her in the throat, shooting her 9 times, and then jumping up and down on her neck. Bolle was a former girlfriend of Nadine Smith's son, Greg. Along with her son and another woman, Nadine Smith picked Bolle up from a motel on the morning of the murder. As they drove away, Nadine Smith confronted Bolle regarding rumors that she had arranged for Greg Smith's murder. Lois choked Bolle and stabbed her in the throat, despite Bolle denying the plot as they drove to the home of her ex-husband in Gans. At the house, Nadine Smith taunted Bolle with a pistol, finally firing several shots. Bolle fell to the floor, and while her son reloaded the pistol, Nadine Smith laughed and jumped on Bolle's neck. She then fired 4 shots into Bolle's chest and 2 to the back of her head. On December 4, 2001, Nadine Smith was executed by lethal injection. For her last meal, she requested barbecue ribs, onion rings, strawberry banana cake, and cherry limeade. There are no records of her last words. Christina Marie Riggs. State, Arkansas. Date of execution, May 2, 2000. Riggs was convicted of capital murder for killing her 2 children. On November 4, 1997, Christina Riggs picked up the antidepressant Elavil from her pharmacy and took potassium chloride and morphine from the hospital where she worked. That night, she gave the Elavil to her children to make them fall asleep. She injected Justin, age 5, with potassium chloride. When he woke up screaming, she smothered him with a pillow. She then smothered Shelby, age 2, with the same item. According to an Arkansas Times article, she took 28 Elavil tablets, normally a lethal dose, and injected herself with enough undiluted potassium chloride to kill 5 people. She fell to the floor unconscious, but the potassium chloride burned a hole in her arm instead of going into her veins. The following day, Riggs' mother found an unconscious Riggs and two dead children. Riggs was taken to a hospital and then arrested on November 6th on 2 charges of capital murder. On May 2, 2000, Riggs was executed by lethal injection. As she was strapped to the gurney, she said that, "There is no way words can express just how sorry I am for taking the lives of my babies. No way I can make up for or take away the pain I have caused everyone who knew and loved them." A minute after the injections began, she whispered, "I love you, my babies." For her last meal, Riggs requested supreme pizza, a salad, fried okra, cherry limeade, and a strawberry shortcake for dessert. Carla Faye Tucker. State, Houston. Date of execution, February 3, 1998. Tucker was sentenced to death for killing 2 people with a pickaxe during a robbery. On June 13, 1983, she went to Jerry Dean's apartment in Houston around 3 in the morning. She was planning to steal a motorcycle. She was with her boyfriend, Daniel Ryan Garrett, and a friend, James Leibrandt. Leibrandt went to find Dean's car while Tucker and Garrett entered Dean's bedroom. Garrett hit Dean multiple times in the back of the head with a ball-peen hammer he found on the floor. Afterward, he stepped out of the room to carry motorcycle parts from the apartment. Tucker stayed in the bedroom. The blows from Garrett made Dean start making a gurgling sound. Frustrated by the noise, Tucker grabbed a 3-foot pickaxe leaning against the wall and struck Dean. Garrett returned to the room and delivered a final blow to Dean's chest before leaving again to load more motorcycle parts into his car. Tucker then noticed a woman who had hidden under the bed covers against the wall. The woman was Deborah Ruth Thornton. Upon discovering Thornton, Tucker grazed her shoulder with the pickaxe. Thornton and Tucker began to struggle, but Garrett returned and separated them. Tucker proceeded to hit Thornton repeatedly with the pickaxe and then embedded the axe in her heart. In 1983, both Tucker and Garrett were indicted for murder and tried separately for their crimes. Tucker was sentenced to death in 1984. Garrett died of liver disease in 1993 while waiting to be executed. On February 3, 1998, Tucker was executed by lethal injection. Her last words were, "I would like to say to all of you, the Thornton family and Jerry Dean's family, that I am so sorry. I hope God will give you peace with this." She requested a banana, a peach, and a garden salad with ranch dressing for her last meal. Judy Buenoano. State, Florida. Date of execution, March 30, 1998. Buenoano was executed in Florida for the 1971 murder of her first husband, James Goodyear. She was also convicted of the 1980 murder of her son, Michael Buenoano, and the 1983 attempted murder of her boyfriend, John Gentry. Buenoano became known as the Black Widow following a guilty verdict for the murder of her husband after she poisoned him with arsenic. In addition to the conviction for murder, she received additional sentences for attempted murder and insurance fraud following the drowning of her paralyzed son. She also attempted to kill her fiancé with a car bomb. A previous boyfriend also mysteriously died whilst dating Buenoano. Her motive was believed to have been greed, as she collected some hundreds of thousands of dollars in insurance money. On March 30, 1998, Buenoano was executed by electrocution. When asked if she had any last words, Buenoano said, "No, sir." Her last meal consisted of steamed broccoli, asparagus, strawberries, and tomato wedges, together with hot tea and lemon. Velma Barfield, State, North Carolina. Date of execution, November 2, 1984. Barfield was convicted of 1 murder, but eventually confessed to more murders. In 1974, Lillian Bullard, Barfield's mother, showed symptoms of intense diarrhea, vomiting, and nausea, only to fully recover a few days later. Later that year, during the Christmas season, Bullard fell ill again with the same symptoms, but died in the hospital a few hours after being admitted on December 30, 1974. In 1976, Barfield began caring for the elderly, working for Montgomery and Dolly Edwards in Lumberton, North Carolina. Montgomery fell ill and died on January 29, 1977. Just over a month after the death of her husband, Dolly experienced symptoms similar to those of Bullard and died on March 1st. Barfield later confessed to the murder of Dolly Edwards. The following year, Barfield became a caretaker for 76-year-old Record Lee, who had a broken leg. On the 4th of June, 1977, Lee's husband, John Henry, suddenly experienced severe stomach and chest pains, vomiting, and diarrhea, and died shortly after. Barfield also confessed to his murder. Roland Stewart Taylor, Barfield's boyfriend and a relative of Dolly Edwards, became another victim. Barfield was worried that he had discovered her forging checks on his account. So she laced his beer and tea with arsenic-based rat poison. Taylor became very ill. As his condition worsened, she took him to the hospital where he died some days later. He died on the 3rd of February, 1978. An autopsy later revealed the presence of arsenic in his system. Despite Barfield's confessions to some of the murders, she was tried and convicted solely for the murder of Taylor. On November 2, 1984, Barfield was executed by lethal injection. These were her final words. "I know that everybody has gone through a lot of pain, all the families connected, and I am sorry, and I want to thank everybody who has been supporting me all these 6 years." For her last meal, Barfield requested cheese doodles and a Coke. Elizabeth Duncan, State, California. Date of execution, August 8, 1962. Duncan was convicted of orchestrating the murder of her daughter-in-law in 1958. She hired Augustine Baldonado and Luis Moya to murder her daughter-in-law, Olga Duncan. Olga was 7 months pregnant at the time. Olga went missing in November 1958. About a month later, investigators found Olga's body in the Casitas Pass of Carpinteria. Baldonado confessed that Duncan had offered him and Moya $6,000 to kill Olga. Then they took the police to the site. According to the coroner and their confession, the two men kidnapped her, beat her with a pistol, strangled her, and buried her in a shallow grave. The grave was along Highway 150 in Ventura County. Reports say that it is possible she was still alive when they buried her. Baldonado and Moya testified that she fought for her life and that had they known she was pregnant, they would not have agreed to kill her. Duncan took Olga's life over jealousy and obsession with her son. At her trial, an acquaintance of Mrs. Duncan summarized the situation. She spoke many times about how she would like to have Frank stay with her and not marry anyone. She said she would make it rather disagreeable if he went out with young ladies. At one point, she told a friend that Olga was unfit to date her son, not to mention a foreigner. All 3 conspirators were sentenced to death and executed. On August 8, 1962, Elizabeth Duncan was executed in the gas chamber of San Quentin. For her last meal, she ate a simple steak and salad. Rhonda Bell Martin. State, Alabama. Date of execution, October 11, 1957. The state of Alabama executed Martin for the murder of Claude Carroll Martin, her 4th husband. Martin killed her victim by rat poisoning. Her crimes only surfaced when the police began to investigate the illness of her 5th husband, Ronald, in March 1953. Under questioning, Rhonda admitted to poisoning her 4th husband, Claude, in 1951. 8 months after Claude's death, she married his son, Ronald, who was subsequently left paralyzed from the effects of poison. On the 19th of May, 1956, Rhonda Martin was charged with murdering her 2nd husband, George Garrett, 3 of her children, her mother, and Claude Martin. Martin was executed on the 11th of October, 1957. She was executed by an electric chair in Alabama. Although there are no records of her last words, the prison officials found a note where Martin said she wanted physicians to find out why I committed the crimes I committed. I can't understand it, for I had no reason whatsoever. There's definitely something wrong. For her last meal, she requested a hamburger, mashed potatoes, cinnamon rolls, and coffee. Betty Butler, State, Ohio. Date of execution, June 11, 1954. Betty Butler was found guilty of murdering Evelyn Clark. Evelyn Clark was a woman with whom she and her 2 children had been living. Clark had offered to pay Butler and her children to live with her in exchange for sex, an offer Butler accepted as she was destitute. The couple allegedly had numerous domestic disputes, up to and including murder. On September 6, 1952, Butler murdered Evelyn Clark while fishing in Sharon Woods. An argument occurred, and once they were back to shore, multiple witnesses saw Betty attack and drown Evelyn. According to Butler, she had defended herself against Clark's unwanted advances. Another testimony suggested that Betty was bisexual and murdered Clark angrily over her attentions to another woman. On June 11, 1954, Butler was executed by electrocution. For her last meal, she requested scrambled eggs with cheese, toast, 2 glasses of milk, and a nice bowl of apricots. There are no records of her last words. If you like the way we create videos and you want us to bring more cases like this to light, please hit the like button and subscribe for more deep dives.